It will be one-off insolvency. First is the DA. A, uniqueness. Troops are being withdrawn from Europe now. Budget cuts. Hartung, June 29. A task force has developed a menu of options that, taken together, could reduce military spending by a total of $960 billion over the next decade. These are substantial cuts. The task force calls for a $100,000 reduction of U.S. troops deployed in Europe and Asia. We should pull back some of our hundreds of thousands of troops stationed overseas in Europe and Asia. Military cuts are a real possibility for the first time since the mid-1990s. B, link. Withdrawing troops from Afghanistan frees them up to be redeployed in Europe. Rozov 09. The Pentagon is going to allot $110 million to modernize and expand military bases. A $50 million military base in Romania could house 1,600 U.S. troops and another $60 million facility for 2,500 troops in Bulgaria. No small sum in the impoverished nations. James Robbins, a senior fellow in the National Security Affairs, said the U.S. efforts in Romania and Bulgaria are part of a global redevelopment strategy started in the early years of the Bush administration to shift U.S. forces out of Germany and move them eastward. The same news source reported that the U.S. intends to deploy troops to Poland at some point in the near future, according to the State Department's Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Ellen Tauscher. C, impact. Increasing troop numbers in Europe escalates tensions and creates the most dangerous scenario for nuclear war. Rozov 09. In such an environment of heightened alarm, otherwise minor contempts and even fears, adversaries' intents can spark a conflict and a conflagration. Over the past 6 years, the worst and most immediate fears have centered on the three major regional conflicts. Theoretically, though, all three nightmare models could be geographically contained. There is a fourth spot on the map, however, where most any spark could ignite a power keg that could draw in and pit against each other the world's two major nuclear powers and immediately ipso facto develop into a world conflict. That is the Baltic Sea region. Now, in case, removing troops sends a signal of U.S. weakness, guts resolve, and destabilizes Pakistan, resulting in nuclear conflict. Fox 10. We cannot bring our troops home immediately. Their mission is not yet accomplished. Were we to leave prematurely without degrading the insurgency and increasing the capability of the Afghan security forces, we would see the return of the destructive forces of transnational terrorism. Not only would we risk the civil war in Afghanistan creating a security vacuum, but we would also risk the destabilization of Pakistan with potentially unthinkable regional nuclear consequences. It would be in a shot of the arm of jihadists everywhere. It would send the signal that we did not have the resolve and political fortitude to see through what we ourselves have described as a national security imperative. And failure in Afghanistan emboldens U.S. adversaries and causes future violence. Carroll 9. Host nations is important to U.S. national security interest, allowing the Taliban and al-Qaeda to return to power in Afghanistan without the proper acceptance of a clear political defeat can only 1, embolden other U.S. adversaries, 2, increase radical Islamic recruitment, 3, undermine those Afghan civilians who supported the U.S., and 4, set back the notion of moderate Muslim governance for decades to come. This is a conflict to diminish the future recruiting base of radical Islam. The potential for future violence is high in the near future. Next, counterterrorism doesn't stop new recruitment. Kaplan 09. Coin advocates argue that only through their approach can al-Qaeda and the Taliban be defeated. Hunting and kill terrorists has its place, but in the long run it only gives the enemy the initiative, lets them melt away into the landscape, and does little to stop new recruits from taking their place. The best way to keep al-Qaeda at bay is to dry up its support by earning the trust of the civilian population, building roads, creating jobs, and power sharing deals.
Can you go over how do we link to your disadvantage?
Right, the argument is that withdrawing troops right now leads them to get sent to Europe.
Does your card specifically talk about a number of U.S. troops that are being withdrawn, or say that it's the 13,000 mark that links into that we proposed in our plan?
It talks about how freeing any troops up would lead them to be redeployed in Europe, so you would have some amount of link.
And where in your impact was nuclear war? Where is this nuclear war going to be being taken place at, or where is this going to happen?
In the Baltic Sea region.
Okay, and can you explain that?
Yeah,
that's
the
gonna
evidence
happen.
talks about how the two world's major nuclear powers are going to have a war after the plan.
And the two world's nuclear powers are who?
I don't know.
Okay. On the case debate, you said that
India and Pakistan.
Oh, between India and Pakistan. And can you go over? You read a card about Pakistan and how we're going to destabilize Pakistan. How is that happening for our case debate?
Right. Where was that? So yeah, the argument that we're going to destabilize Pakistan is that it's going to signal that we don't have the political fortitude to see through what we're working on.
And we're losing political fortitude by decreasing troops this year.
Well, right, we're kind of giving up, which signals that we're not actually going to complete our project.
But because we're not withdrawing all troops, how is that a sign of giving up?
It's a signal of weakness. It's a sign that this strategy isn't going to work. We need to try a new strategy.
Okay, and then also your failure in Afghanistan card. Can you talk about how this is going to be creating future violence, or like how does your card warrant that this is actually going to create future violence in Afghanistan?
Right, so it talks about how you increase the recruiting base of radical Islam, so you would increase terrorism.